When Nick Farr-Jones' Wallabies of 1991 and the John Eales generation of 1999 held aloft the Rugby World Cup as winners, they stood atop rugby's fabled Everest. How different from the time in the mid-70s when Australian rugby lay lost and bleeding behind Ayers Rock. That journey to ascend the highest heights there are in world rugby began when Australia was stung by shocking cricket score defeats at the hands of the All Blacks in 1972. The woeful Wallabies, they were called, and the awful Aussies.
Here's Stegman. Stegman with Stevens. Stevens has Cole with him. Back to Cole, and Cole knocking on. Away they go, the Tongans.
A year later, rock bottom was hit when the tiny Pacific island of Tonga humiliated the Wallabies by beating them in Brisbane.
Look at the Tongans. They're jumping up and down. They're doing somersaults. They're turning circles. They've done everything.
It was clear that decisive action had to be taken, and it was. In that journey from the miserable rugby lowlands to the rarefied summit, there was no more important height scaled along the way than the 1984 Grand Slam tour to the UK and Ireland. Throughout the 20th century, 7 previous generations of Wallabies had gone on long tours to the home unions of the United Kingdom and Ireland. But the holy grail of 4 successive victories against England, Ireland, Wales and Scotland had always proved elusive. The 8th Wallabies, however, famously achieved that success. They played a flamboyant, expansive, high-wire and hunt game that thrilled and delighted the British and Irish crowds, long used to a more crushingly conservative, kicking style of play from their own players. In the Test matches, the Wallabies scored 12 tries and allowed their own line to be breached only once. And in the final match, in an unofficial test against the Barbarians, they took on the combined strength of the greatest players in Europe and beat them too. The base camp of the Grand Slam victory of 1984, though, is properly situated in 1975. For the Grand Slam, like the other recent successes of the Wallabies, didn't just happen. The glory of winning against the home unions was built on the solid foundations of decisions and actions taken by Australian players and officials more than a decade before, at a time when Australian rugby was considered very differently from the way it is now.
The English gave us the impression in 1975 that the most important thing to them was the forthcoming 5 Nations tournament back in the Northern Hemisphere. And they had a young side with a few inexperienced players who they were going to blood against the lowly Australians and get a bit of match practice and then go home and win the 5 Nations.
We were coming second. We were too soft. We didn't have any idea of what was wanted up front to win our possession, whether it be a scrum or a line-out or the kick-offs to us or the hard work on the ground with what they call today rucks or mauls.
When it came to playing England, there was certainly this great desire not to just be easy beats. The players felt that way, the coach certainly felt that way, and I think our supporters did too.
Now Neary has the ball for England. And it's a penalty, England. Penalty. A lash of players in the forwards there. And Shaw was involved, the Queensland player, they're all out now. Well, we'll call that one a dead heat.
Well, there's one thing about it. They're all still standing, Norman.
75, Dave Brockhoff as coach, and his motto was we're the step forward Wallabies.
We used the word step forward, which meant go forward with body height, which is going to mean we're going to get some continuous good ball, good possession, which the backs can use.
I think we'd gotten to a stage where enough was enough. We didn't quite have the bulk that we needed, and I suppose that was offset by a bit of fire in the belly.
Australia's ball against the head, working the far side to right, going through tackles to Osborne on the wing, and Hipwell back in field alone. Lane's there. Try to Australia. Right, so there's the siren. Hipwell goes, and Hipwell puts it straight over in the air, and they're chasing after it. But Australia has won the game. Australia has won the game. And Australia at last has won an international match in Australia, and that's a great boost for rugby union again. 16 points to 9.
In between that match and the match in Brisbane the following fortnight, a week, I can't really remember, step forward came really on, because I could see then we had never won a test match at Ballymore, ever, and we hadn't won a series for many years, I think 16 or 17 years, and the pressure really on. And I knew we were good enough, but England at the same time brought out 5 or 6 mongrel bruisers to strengthen up their side up front.
We had to take it to the English. I think physically they were probably a little stronger than us. Technically they were much better than us, I think, technically. And our what we had in our arsenal was our aggression, if you like, our step forward policy, that we are not going to take a backward step.
In the shed before the game, the motivation was extremely high. I had Dick Marks in there, I had John Bain, chairman of the selectors, I had the Australian president in there. So they were all in the room and heard exactly what I said. And the story is the door came off. Let's get out of here, he's mad.
And the Australian forwards driving into that first ruck. And McDougall for Australia, very fierce in that ruck. And there's a violent. Here's Hipple, the blind side. And the winger Osborne over the quarter line. Hipple again, but in touch. And that was a violent start by Australia.
And we had a call, like the Lions in Africa. They had number 99 if it got too tough. And they called 99, which everyone went toe-to-toe to just cut it out. And that happened a lot, the British Lions tour. And so we had a call, a beach. And this game started, and it was an enormous explosion of enthusiasm and physical violence.
And a penalty here. Let's see what happens. A clash of players straight away. McDougall was involved. I think McDougall first of all, and all sets of forwards here. Well, I don't think anybody... And there's a McDougall again for number 3 against him is Mike Burton. Osborne has right with him, Osborne to the far side. And he was knocked badly down that time, hit very hard. And the penalty here, and he's off the field. Number 3 for England's been sent off. Burton has been sent off. What a sensational start.
I remember through the game worrying what I'm going to say at half-time. When the president of the Australian Rugby Board sent me up a note, call them off. And just as before I got to the team, Kenny Wright came to me, "Hey, Brock, what's wrong? You look absolutely white. I've never seen a man look so bad. I was worse." I accepted my responsibility. He said, "Look, it's only a tea party out here."
The game flowed from end to end, and they seemed to, when they lost a player, open the game up more, and that caught us a little bit by surprise as well. And I remember it being a fast game, but certainly from my perspective, I didn't find it, tougher than other things I'd encountered during my rugby career.
Out to Wright, using that just short kick through, the bounce important here. Shaw's through, Shaw's up over halfway to Weatherson. Weatherson has Squires and support, but Weatherson might score himself. Weatherson goes for the corner. A wonderful try to Australia. A wonderful try. Australia hit the front. To Wright, and Wright moving here with Monaghan. Here goes Monaghan up towards halfway. Ripley's coming across. Monaghan's kick is keeping the ball in play. And Rollitt underneath it. Now, Shaw, Price to Wright. Wright's going to the corner. Wright himself, a beautiful pass to Shaw. And Tony Shaw's close. To Shaw again, the other Shaw. And the pass back to Monaghan. Monaghan over the line. Magnificent try. Magnificent try.
That time, I think there was a great sense of elation. The Jeff Shaws and the John Hipwells who had been through and Stuart McDougall, who had been through that tougher time in the last 2 or 3 years. I think they had a great sense of satisfaction that they were finally getting somewhere and getting some back.
He had this vision that Australia was going to, rise and we were all going to be part of it. And the English Test was the first step, if you like, the first level of the Empire State Building, as Brock sort of made that analogy.
The violence of the test caused a stir in Fleet Street, and the English Rugby Football Union threatened to withdraw Australia's invitation.
A little bit of violence in a rugby game then is always good value for the newspaper boys. So they did cover it, and lo and behold, they decided the Aussies were the transgressors and the vagabond scallywags and ne'er-do-wells who started the trouble, and Mike Burton retaliated and got sent off, and the whole thing took a downturn from there.
A compromise was brokered, where Dave Brockhoff was gagged and Ross Turnbull, the tour manager, promised the English good behaviour from the Australian tourists.
England threatened to cancel the tour, so we determined that we would be very well behaved and we'd be great ambassadors for Australia and our sport.
So there was no question of Dave Brockhoff being told to rein in his coaching style?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Total support there. But there was to be no foul play.
Dave Brockhoff wasn't given the latitude on that on that UK tour that he had in Australia. He always spoke to the press in Australia. The press loved him. And over in England, there was a fairly strict management regime. The manager of the team, Ross Turnbull, did all the PR work, and I am pretty sure that Brock was told to shut up.
Certain individuals would not allow me to use the word step forward again. That was a crying disgrace because Australia had last been given an image, respectability and pride and performance, and certain political people said, no, we're not going to allow you to use the word step forward.
The press were very much onto Steve Finnane and Stuart McDougall in particular, and I think there was pressure on us that they kept on saying we won't be able to get away with in the British Isles with what we got away with in Australia. The Scottish test erupted there in one instance, which came from it was a high tackle from John Byrne, but it was certainly unintentional. And the Scots piled in and were quite violent. I mean, if we would have done that, all hell would have broken loose in the press. And I think the British press quote was, and John Byrne had to be replaced after, unfortunately, retaliatory action, which happened to break his cheekbone when he was kicked in the head. So, the British press have their own way of putting a spin on things.
Good scrummage ball for Australia. Hindmarsh, Byrne on the dummy run. In comes Paul McLean. The interception for Ian McGee.
The Wallabies could have won the first test. Scotland scored an intercept try. Then Paddy Batch held the ball up over the line when all he needed to do was ground it.
We're bitterly disappointed with that. We should have beaten Scotland, and they were a pretty good side.
Mervyn Davies, fed out from Bobby Winter. Edwards, John Bevan. Ray Gravel almost through, gives it to John Bevan. There must be a score here for J.J. Williams.
We went to Wales, and they absolutely cleaned us up. They really put the cleaners through us.
J.J. Williams with a quick through. Can he get the touch?
I think at the end of the game, everyone was very disappointed. But when you get beaten by a team that plays so well and was so superior in just about every aspect of their match, it's a bit like sometimes seeing a fighter who goes the distance with a world-ranked fighter and is just happy to be on his feet at the end of the day.
In the third test of the tour, the achievement of recent victory over the English in Australia amounted to little when the Wallabies met them at Twickenham.
It's going to be Maxwell out to David Duckham. What a half tackle by Paul McLean, but he couldn't bring him down. That's hoisted high. Mark Lone calls for it, gathers it in just outside his own 25.
They didn't like us very much in those days. There was a real, I think there is an attitude that English rugby and UK rugby and Welsh rugby in those days particularly was dominant, and we were the newcomers, and we're trying to establish ourselves as a force in world rugby, and I think we were discounted to some extent and derided particularly about the way we played the game.
Will Australia win a test before they go home? That is the question, really, people are asking. Robbie very close to offside there. The switch move to John Ryan. He'll pound his way over. And first try in an international on this tour. 2 to 3 yards out. They've won it. It's a try for Australia. Their back row, Tony Shaw, the try scorer. Robbie, Campbell, Enser, chipping over the Australian back division. John Meadows is there to cover. And Mark Lone once more. Lone, another of those powerful runs straight downfield. Support from Weatherston, and this will seal the Australian victory.
The Wallabies put a positive interpretation on the tour. They'd done well in the provincial matches, and players like Mark Lone, Tony Shaw and Paul McLean had come of age. Indeed, they became not just the backbone of the Australian team for many years to come, but also its heart and soul. But in the immediacy of the moment, the tour was not judged a success. The Wallabies came away with only one win from the 4 tests, and many players returned to Australian shores with bitter memories of British arrogance.
The thing that really stuck in my craw was not the fact that we were beaten by some better teams in the UK, but by one of these Welsh officials who was asked to sum up the whole tour. I think this was the night before we actually left, and he said that we weren't much of a team, and we would be remembered as good social tourists. And I thought it was pretty condescending, and it's something that really stuck in my craw.
In 1977, there were .3 carry 1 subtract 2, no tests for the Wallabies, and the Australian Rugby Union's coffers echoed with emptiness. It wasn't until 1978, when the mighty team from Wales toured, that the coffers began to tinkle with incoming cash again, and the Wallabies had a chance to show what they had learned.
The Welsh that came out in '78 were 5 Nations champions. They were king of the heap, had some of the best players that have ever played for Wales in the team. Came out, I think, for a summer holiday, and got a very nasty surprise.
I think Australia really targeted the Welsh tour as maybe a kickstart to sort of their presence in world rugby.
Steve Finnane, whilst you can condone certain things, in the game with Sydney, he had a bit of a battering. I think he was unable to come to the dinner in the evening, if I remember rightly, that he had stitches in his head and he was concussed, and he was in a very, very physical encounter.
On our head, I just collapsed the scrum, deliberately collapsed the scrums on our feet, so they couldn't get any advantage by pushing us or lifting us or whatever. But of course, as soon as I did that, the Welsh captain, Terry Cobner, put the slipper into me, as did the other second rower, Davies, I think his name was. So at the end of the game, my head was like a pin cushion. So it was a really dirty game.
You kept on collapsing the scrum?
I just kept on collapsing it. And I kept on getting kicked.
There weren't many easy games. Obviously, we came off with some good wins against New South Wales, Queensland, but then really came unstuck in the tests. First test was a fairly brutal affair. I think the second test is obviously remembered for the Steve Finnane, Graham Price incident, but the first test was by far the dirtier game.
There's the push by Wales, and there's a push and a half. Look at number 3. Now McLean, his chip kick through, they're coming through on this one.
There was things that went on in that game, and sort of 20-odd years on, you don't want to dwell on who was to blame, but I think both sides were rather guilty of inflicting things on each other, I suppose.
Gareth Davis to Fennick, Fennick back in field, and Fennick still going. Fennick back over here to Gravel very close, back to Brynmore Williams, it's a try! Try to Wales, 9-8 to score. Australia looking for this ball, here's the chance out to this side of McLean, and Cornelson, and Crow on the wing, Crow back in field, it's a try to Australia! Try under the post, magnificent!
I don't think it was a very good game. I remember Phil Crow walking beside me as we were walking off the field, and he said that was bullshit. And I said, mate, a win's a win. But we certainly won the fight and we won the game.
How do you rate the Australian side as an international rugby side?
Well, they've beaten Wales, so they must be a fair standard. But Oh, they're a good side, and credit to Australia. They've kept the team together, or the nucleus of the team together, for 3 years. And when you're fortunate enough to do that, you must be very, very good. And they compare favourably with any team that Wales has met in the last 2 years.
I think we probably went into the whole thing thinking we're going to get another flogging, but we beat them in the first test, and we thought, shit, we can win this. We can win this whole series.
It was an opportunity for Australia to make history, to beat Wales in Australia, who were Five Nations champions, and secure a place on the world stage, if you like.
And the incident with Steve Finnane, had you had any run-ins with him prior on that tour?
Well, nothing that which front row forwards don't get involved in. We all get in our scrapes and confrontations. I mean, that is the biggest part of the game. You know? But I can't see what I did to upset him in the second test, because I was only on the field about a minute, so it wasn't long enough to upset anybody.
The loose head prop, which is this person here, he would be the hinge. And then all these players, all the second rowers and the breakaways, they would push towards the right-hand side. So as the scrum comes in and engages the loose head prop on the other side, me, you end up with this enormous extra pressure on you. That is an intimidating experience. If you let them do that all day, you're going to be in all sorts of strife.
We'd driven the Australians back, split the prop from the hooker. Next thing you know is spitting up my gold cap on Sydney cricket gown.
Knight almost to the quarter. Covering up his Holmes on the far side. There's a clash of players back on halfway. There's Gerald Davis. Back in field to JPR Williams. JPR over halfway, looking for Davis again. Good passing. Davis is still going. And it's still at halfway. There's a clash of fight going on as the game goes on. We're cut for the game. Here's Gravel. Gravel, angle kick for the corner. Coming through fast is JJ. Well, that's on the line and over the line. And back on halfway, there's a fight still going on. Well, the players have been fighting there for 30, 40 seconds, and Wales almost scored a try.
The scrum came up, and I stepped into Graham Price and whacked him. And then this enormous brawl erupted.
And there's a man coming off.
Well, here's the man coming off the field. It's the front row, Graham Price. He is leaving the scene, and it means that in a few seconds...
Graham Price went down. He had a broken jaw. You know, I didn't mean to break his jaw, and I'm sorry that I broke his jaw, but I'm certainly not sorry that I threw the punch.
Yeah, Steve's a very calm, cool, collected customer, and I think he just needed to sort out his technical difficulties with a certain front row called Price.
I don't hold anything against him. I mean, it was the severity of the injury wasn't intended. So I had punches before that, and I had punches afterwards. So
and they're looking at our sidearm shot. They're about a metre out.
Now looking for the big push again. Right on the line. That's a try. That's a try. Try to Australia at the back of the line.
There's the jump up there. Oh, that was Hillhouse there. It went up high. And someone at the back of the line out. May have been Lane.
Well, Mark Lane has been announced as the scorer. Now to McLean. A drop-it goal.
I saw the field goal that Paul McLean allegedly kicked in the second half. From my memory now, it's a couple of metres wide, and we just couldn't believe it when the full-back threw me the ball for the dropout 22, and the referee, sort of Dick Byers, I think, run into the halfway line with his hand up. We thought, well, it's got to be joking, you know. But well, that's life. It's a great story. You can retell, I suppose, and perhaps we shouldn't look too seriously upon these things.
everybody except the referee thought that he'd missed. But never mind, that's the result. Although I didn't see it, I was in St Vincent's Hospital in in Sydney.
I'd rather be remembered as someone who could catch the ball, make a good tackle, and do something skillful in a match. I'm a bit embarrassed by the fact that everywhere I go, people come up and say, that was a fantastic punch, breaking Graham Price's jaw, etc., etc. And, I used to just I've got sick of it.
For rugby fans, that tour by Wales in 1978 is remembered for Steve Finnane's punch. Perhaps it should be remembered, though, for the fact that the Wallabies had again defeated one of the giants of rugby. With the exception of Ireland, Australia had defeated every major rugby nation to visit Australia between 1975 and 1981. So at least at home it was clear Australian rugby was holding its own. There was a feeling that the future held great promise too. A team of Australian schoolboys, coached by Jeff Mould, toured Japan, France, Britain and Ireland. The team included players who would soon be lighting up rugby fields all over the world. Michael Hawker, Chris Roach, Michael O'Connor, Tony Melrose, and of course the fabulous Ella brothers, Gary, Glenn and Mark. The schoolboys swept all before them, winning every match and returning to Australia, quite rightly known as the Invincibles.
And look again for this flowing passing and see how it all ends. Any one of 4 Australians could have scored this try. But still one more try to come, and as good a one as I've seen on this ground since the Barbarians won against New Zealand 4 or 5 years ago. It's still live, and Mark Ella is going to get the last score of the afternoon.
By the start of the 1980s, the stars of the schoolboy team had matriculated to the senior Australian side. The Wallabies had beaten France in Australia and defeated the All Blacks in 4 of their last 5 tests. So it was with great expectations and hopes so high that the 7th Wallabies embarked on another tour to the UK and Ireland in 1981. Coached by Bob Templeton and captained by Tony Shaw, the Australians could at last sniff, just up ahead, the coveted 4 successive victories in Europe they needed for that elusive Grand Slam. Maybe this time.
We had great expectations. There's no doubt about it. I think the individual talent we had in 81 probably far outweighed the talent collectively that we had in 84. It was a very, very good side.
And it often happens with cricket and rugby teams. Whenever you go there, you're either the best team that's ever left Australia or the worst team. You know, you're never the most mediocre team.
We didn't live up to expectations for a lot of reasons. You know, the conditions weren't favourable. I think the strength of British rugby in the early 80s, as a part of, well, certainly 81, was much stronger than in 84. We had a great time, but success didn't come our way.
I mean, I, as captain of the tour, made a statement that I thought we might be able to get away and win most of our games, and I think, in hindsight, that put a lot of pressure on the English press. Took that up and it put a lot of pressure on us because they thought, who are these upstarts coming from down under who think they can come and beat us at home?
We scored more tries than what the opposition did, but lost games. I think the only test we won in 80-81 was against Ireland, and I reckon that's the only one that we should have lost. We should have won the others on the tries that we scored.
Australia, in previous occasions, and Ireland lead with 6 wins to 2. Hipwell, McLean, Hawker. Hawker with the high kick. There's a lot of space there, and the Australians are up in force. Boydovan tried to get hands to it, couldn't quite. Tony Shaw has it now. Now it's fed out from Hawker to McLean. McLean to Slack, Slack to Moon. Moon running into that sea of green jerseys, but the Australians still in possession. Darcy to Hipwell. Hipwell to Slack. Slack out there to O'Connor. A chance for the young winger. The try has been given. Phillips held his throw back, but Peter McLean got it out to Paul McLean. Miss out Hawker. That was Slack. Brendan Moon's coming up fast. Across goes Terry Holmes. Moon with the tackle. The try for Slack. And it's been given.
Mid-tour, Paul McLean went into a kicking slump. A slump he attributes to one missed kick.
Slacky scored a try, and it was 10 metres to one side of the post. And it was like, this is 99 times out of 100, like eyes closed stuff. And I missed it. And I was just shocked. Not embarrassed at that time, but I was just genuinely shocked. 2 points in a test match as a gimme in a game like that was just crucial.
Hipwell has a look to Paul McLean, who's standing a bit on the left. Maybe there's a move on here, and there it is. Mark Lone driving straight through. The feed outside to Mitchell Cox. What a
Then Mitchell Cox scored in the corner, and I kicked it from the touchline. And I thought, OK, things are all right. But I kept coming back to this missed kick. The 2 points wasn't crucial in the end result, but it was crucial for me going forward. And maybe that was the point where I thought, well, something's going wrong here.
The pick-up by Gareth Williams. The feed from Ackerman. Gareth Davis. Evans is there. There's a big gap as it goes out to Clive Reese. Reese over the 22. Reese once again looking for support. Gets it from Moriarty. Can he get the ball down? The try is given. And they've won it. Gareth Davis going for the drop goal as he hooked it enough. The referee's hand goes up and Wales are ahead.
And I can remember in the dying seconds of the match that one of our players, I couldn't quite see who it was, had intercepted the ball.
Holmes running away out there to the left, and there's an interception by Andrew Slack.
And still had 50 yards to run, and I was just hoping that it was going to be Brendan Moon, but it was Slacky. And Slacky didn't have the legs for that, and he was buggered like all of us, and he was trying to find Brendan Moon, but it didn't eventuate, and we lost the test match.
Internationals for sustained excitement, I think that they've seen here at Cardiff for many a long day.
Another memory I had of that test was the morning after, and when I woke up, and where you're confused sometimes of where you are and where am I. It was dark, and I was disoriented, and I suddenly realised that we're in Wales and we've been beaten, and it was one of the low points of my life. I can remember that.
It was such a thrill for the three of us all to be picked for the Wallabies. You know, coming after the 77-78 schoolboy tours, a lot of people were expecting big things from the Yellow Brothers going back to the UK. But, I mean, at the same time, it's been a fantastic experience. I think it was also a disappointment from the rugby point of view.
Rumours surfaced of a split between the New South Wales and Queensland players on the tour. This was denied by the players, but their failure to live up to expectations caused questions over the style of play and the approach being taken by the team's management.
I think that one of the problems was that we always took the conservative approach to the games, and we didn't use the free-flowing players that we had. You know, Michael Hawker and Michael O'Connor at that stage, to me, were absolutely on fire. Mark at 5'8", Glenn at fullback, although Roger Gould was, I think, could run the ball as well as anyone, and an exceptional player. But we had a lot of guys that could gel together. But the sides were never sort of picked with an expansive game in mind.
The warmest it got during the day was about -4, -5 degrees, and at night time it got down to about -12, -13, and that pitch out there was absolute concrete. But because of the electric blanket, they managed to, you know, soften it up. But there was one strip of the electric circuit that was broken, and there was a strip about a yard wide, and it was just a white patch. It was absolute brick hard.
Every other major ground in the UK was closed due to the weather conditions. We had strips of snow up the side of the field. It was bitterly cold, but they're the conditions you play in, and you've got to put up with it. But that was just unbelievably frustrating test match.
This is David Johnson to Andy Irvin. Charge down, Simon Poitevin will score! Laidlaw's tackled, he's got a release. Scotland driving in, here's a chance for Australia. It's a penalty.
Penalties in those days, within kicking distance, you'd have a go. They turned, their backs were out of position, their wing was definitely out of position, and Brendan was flat.
Was Australia a little unlucky? Both Paul McLean and Slack were within range of that ball. It only had to go bounce the right way for them. It was a great opportunity.
Brendan Moon could score. Yes! Paul McLean, a lovely kick.
That probably came out of the fact that I wasn't place kicking well.
What a delight that was.
Not too sure whether Bob Templin would have been too happy had we not scored, but anyway.
Slack to Ella, to McLean, back to Ella. Lovely pass to Moon. Moon has Slack outside. Will Slack score? I think he will, yes! That's a lovely try to Andy Slack. His fifth shot at penalty goal. Will he level the scores? It's good. What a day it's been for Andrew Irvine this afternoon.
The Scots hadn't scored a try, but Andy Irvine, from penalty after penalty, kicking goal after goal. and we couldn't kick a goal.
You know, Australia really did play most of the good rugby, and they scored 3 cracking tries, and I think the one that we got was a bit lucky.
I don't know whether it was a measure of win or loss, but it was a high ball, and I must have caught about 10 or 15 that day, and I planted myself and looked at it and watched it and put my arms out, and I didn't even touch it. It sort of landed 4 feet to my left.
Rutherford again, another high kick. Gould caught out of position this time, but he's back there, lost the ball.
It's not like I dropped it. I didn't even touch the thing, and it hit the ground, and he was running through, and it bounced in his hands and straight underneath the goalpost.
It was a testing Gary Owen.
All the frustrations of the tour previous, the matches previous, which we'd lost and yet scored more tries, I think came to a head, and the game wasn't going as he hoped. And I think the Scottish took advantage of this and did a bit of niggling.
We were under pressure on our own line. We'd come out from that period of pressure. I thought the Scots were offside, remonstrating with the referee about the fact that they were offside, and they seemed to be continually offside and getting away with it. And Billy came from behind as I was talking to the referee and questioned the parentage and significantly.
I basically said, would you mind shutting your face and just getting on with the game, being very polite? And he took wrong umbrage to that.
I just threw one which whistled past the referee's nose, clocked Bill. He went down, I think, more with fright than anything else. And I just thought to myself, what have I done here? The referee said, wait over there, and the Scots were saying to him, stay down, Billy, we'll get this bloke sent off, stay down. So I think, you know, I've had flashing through my mind, Australian captain, sent off.
I think the annoying thing for me was that the referee said he never saw the punch, but he saw something, but he wouldn't commit himself. It was an incident that happened, that flared and was finished as quick as that. But it actually did give the Scottish team great inspiration.
Tony Shaw, needing only one match to equal the Wallaby captaincy record, was dropped from the team.
Walked into the selection meeting and we picked the front row, picked the second row. I wasn't in the second row. I thought, well, I'm back to the back row position. Wasn't in the back row. I said, boys, I'm not playing at the backs. This is a bit unusual. So it was discussed at the selection meeting, but I thought it should have been discussed earlier. But that's my view.
England again trying to work it up that narrow side. Bill Beaumont now. Now it's Smith. There's a chance here. Davis couldn't hold it. Up come the Australians. It's kicked on as Hawker goes through. The long kick by Hawker. Back there goes Mike Slemon. Slemon with the save. Brilliant work by the Lancashire player. The kick on by Brandon Moon. It could be a try. The referee's arm goes out. 5 or 6 metres from the Australian line. The Australians covering desperately all over the place. And it's a chance there for Jevons, and the try has been given.
It was disappointing. I mean, we felt that we could have beaten English. I think we scored 2 tries to 1 in that test match and lost the game, which was the story of our lives on that trip.
Bob Templeton manfully carried the blame for what was seen as another failure for the Wallabies. Again, there was only one test victory to show from a 3-month tour, and there was disappointment expressed by many that once again the talented tourists had not met the expectations they set out with. The weather was blamed, and a law change, and Paul McLean's rare off-season with the boot, and a style of play that seemed uncomfortably caught between adventure on the one side and caution on the other, but mainly the Wallabies' failure in the line-out.
Our particular generation, that was probably our Achilles heel, was the line-out play. We didn't win our line-out, all our own line-out ball, nor did we win a certain percentage of the opposition's line-out ball. And line-out is the slow poison of rugby.
The upshot was that Bob Templeton relinquished the Australian coaching position in favour of the leading proponent of running rugby, Bob Dwyer. Over the next 2 years, Dwyer had mixed results, including a shock loss to Scotland, but a great win and a surprising win over New Zealand. This was judged, however, to be not good enough. For in 1984, a few months before the start of the Australian season, a bitter coup took place in Australian rugby which claimed Bob Dwyer's scalp. At the time, it was thought the Wallabies' failure to get a single win against France in late '83 caused Dwyer's demise. But the origins of the coup lay much earlier, when Alan Jones, former teacher, former speechwriter to Malcolm Fraser, and incumbent coach of Manly, approached his great friend and rugby power broker, Ross Turnbull, for help in getting the job.
So it's pretty simple, mate. If Manly beat Randwick, I will support you as the Australian coach.
The finalists in the Sydney club competition that year were on one side Randwick, the mighty Galloping Greens, premiers 5 times in succession, and the club where Bob Dwyer had made his name, with the 3 Ella brothers mixing their magic to great effect. Against them were Manly, who had not won a premiership for the previous 3 decades, but this year had been taken over by Alan Jones. In the final, with Manly narrowly in front and the final bell already gone, a single kick decided everything.
Manly had a good scrum, they wheeled the ball, came out to me, I had a shot.
The bell's gone. Mark Ella.
Yes, Alan Jones got the Wallaby job. That's how much was at stake.
Jones was voted in as national coach at a meeting at Australian Rugby Union headquarters. The candidates had been tested on their rugby knowledge and quite fierce public campaigns were fought. In the end, it was the New South Wales delegates voting en bloc, led by Turnbull, who, et tu, Brute, voted against Dwyer and for Jones to put him over the top.
Why do you think New South Wales supported you? Because you had a background in Queensland. You were from Queensland.
I think they most probably thought I was the best candidate, if I might give an immodest answer. They had an exam. What was the exam to mean if it wasn't going to be used? They had access to all of that. And there was disillusionment within the Australian team, and so I got the job. I don't know what motivated them to do what they did, but I had no dialogue with them about it. It was just a night of the long knives at Crane Place.
Jonesy knew my position. We may have spoken, I don't know if we made phone calls, but he knew that I was supportive of Bob. If I would have kicked the field goal, Bob Dwyer would have been still Australian coach.
Right from the beginning, Jones instituted his new philosophies.
His idea was, no, we don't pick the players and then work out the tactics. He said, I will work out the tactics together with my information on the opposition, and then you give me the players that can deliver that program.
So Stephen Cutler was the first person I picked for Australia, and I told him the day after I became coach, and I knew this was unprecedented, but I thought, oh, well, bugger this. I mean, you know, they must be waiting for me to fail, and I'm going to do it my way. So I went to the Ku-ring-gai College of Advanced Education. I didn't know Cutler, but he was told he would never play for Australia again. And I said, look, you know, I'm Alan Jones. How do you do, Mr. Jones? He said. And I said, my bank manager calls me Mr. Jones. My name's Alan. I said, listen, how fit are you? How are you going? Well, I said, you'll be the first player picked because I have a reason why, but you better get yourself fit. And I told him there and then. And so it went on, and I put this team together which would dominate at the line-out because that would give us ball and we'd force people to kick.
Under Bob Dwyer, Mark Ella had been made captain of the Wallabies at the age of just 23. He led by example, playing, inspiring and organising running rugby as it had never been played before. At Concord Oval, after the annual New South Wales versus Queensland fixture, the national team was to be announced. Jones presented his team to the other selectors, John Bain and Bob Templeton.
And they said, well, you fought the battle to get here. You're entitled to your team. They were wonderful. And that was it. The team, exactly as I wanted it, they gave it. And I said, look, I've got to go because and I raced out. I got halfway down the steps and said, we haven't got a captain. Hang on, we haven't got a captain. Tempo's shouting back down at me. So I went upstairs, a captain, well, the existing bloke's the captain. And there was a very strong feeling against my other 2 colleagues about Mark's lack of discipline that the captaincy, they thought, not me, and I'm not getting off the hook here. And I said, well, hang on, you're going to skewer me. I mean, who do you think should be captain? And they named a person, which would have been just, I thought, ridiculous. I said, hang on. On the one hand, you're wanting to knock off the incumbent. Then you want to go put a bloke in that no one's ever thought of before. I don't know where. Listen, Mark was captain of New South Wales. Andrew's captain of Queensland. You take the captain you want. I'm happy with that.
Jonesy came and got me, said, Mark, you've been dropped as captain. I was disappointed. I said, well, OK, that's fine. Thanks, Al. I'm just going to go back inside. Jonesy said, no, don't go inside. You know, you're better off staying outside. I said, why? And he said, well, you know, I don't want you to go inside. And I basically said, well, I've got to go inside.
And Mark came to me and said, congratulations, and he went off. And it wasn't a sort of normal, hearty, big smiley congratulations. It was a pretty perfunctory sort of one, and I just sort of wondered why Mark would say that. I felt that I'd be in the team, and I knew Mark had been in the team, but something just twigged, and that was the first time I thought something's happening here.
I knew it was a great prize being captain of Australia, but I didn't imagine any player would ever think it was his property. And knowing Mark as I did, I knew him very well, and I'd spent a lot of time with Mark and helped him a lot as captain and so on, and I didn't think there would be the reaction that there was, but I can now understand that I might have been a bit inexperienced in that.
I wasn't devastated, I was disappointed, and you're disappointed when you get dropped or you don't get things you want. Maybe I was a spoiled brat. I was disappointed, but I wasn't devastated. I got over it pretty quickly.
The first substantial test for the Wallabies under Alan Jones was in 1984 when the All Blacks toured Australia. It all came down to a deciding third test at the Sydney Cricket Ground, where the Wallabies missed their chance.
Ella, Hawker, still tentative, these Australian backs. They're not running onto the ball. Rope setting up. Now they go. Hawker.
We didn't play well in the home series. There were lots of reasons why that didn't happen, but funny enough, I don't blame Jonesy for. I definitely don't blame Jonesy for the way we played, particularly in the third test of that New Zealand series. I think the players on the field made bad options, basically, and we lost the game, not the coach, or his style or philosophy.
Good scrum for Australia. Ella is a good line here too.
The style of game that we played was contrary to what we were told by the coach, and I was basically catching and passing, and my game had finished, and therefore there was no continuity. We were playing too much set pieces.
Hawker. Straight across to Green. That was a shocker.
Some people took the law into their own hands. Ross Reynolds, for example, was the lock. He decided to play the short side, which just drove me nuts. And I sent down 100 instructions to play the width. And we had a lot of ball, stack of ball. And we kept on taking off the back of the scrum, and I was just insane, and so was Mark.
I said a few things to the players on the field. And I basically told Jonesy that, when we go to Europe, that we can't win playing like this. Basically, I wanted first say in what move was called, and Jonesy agreed with that.
Mark Ella was just a genius. I mean, he's Tiger Woods, basically, of rugby.
With Ella having first call of backline play and the personnel in place, the team went into camp to prepare for the tour to Britain and Ireland.
From a training perspective, we knew from the 10 days or whatever we'd spent at Camperdown and Sydney Uni leading into the tour that this wasn't going to be a breeze in terms of training, and come hell or high water, rain, snow, sleet, wind, hail, we were going to be working hard every day, and occasionally mornings and afternoon trainings and meetings at night and the rest of it, which is probably a bit of a change from previous tours.
The nature of some of the training wasn't to everyone's taste.
We were staying at Camperdown Travel Lodge. Jones would take us down to Sydney University and we'd sing the national anthem and clip Go the Shears Boys and all that. And then when we had a bit of time, we did rugby training. It'd come in handy on tour, mate. You never know when you need to drop a ditty, mate. You got to drop in it like that, and we were all ready to go, the boys.
The UK tour is regarded as the plum for rugby players and goes towards explaining why many forego the lure of the rugby league dollar. For 2.5 months, these players will enjoy the best of British hospitality, all expenses paid. Although thanks to a demanding itinerary, they'll be seeing a lot more of the countryside than they'd care for.
That's a charitable way of putting it, yes. I think we'll spend most of it in buses. But we've known that all along, Gordon, and I think we've just got to adjust to that mentally more than anything else. And I've spoken at length this week about it, and I think the players are ready to accommodate those demands, difficult though they're going to be.
For David Campese, his first tour to the United Kingdom and Ireland had a surprise beginning.
I realised we were in for a very hard tour. The first day we arrived, hotel, bags, in the room, training. We trained for 3 hours. So I think that and Alan just sort of said, guys, we're here to do a job. We're not here for a holiday.
And this was a lot different to the old days, because I can remember Wallaby tours going away where golf was compulsory and training was optional.
Alan Jones came out and said, well, I don't care if we win the tests 3-0. We are going over there to win.
We arrived at a hotel in London for the opening of the whole tour, the day they arrived, and he came in talking as a formality they'd win the 4 tests. He might have to lose a couple of midweek matches because he'd have injured players and only pick half a team. But the actual 4 tests, he just said that would be a formality. They would definitely win, and there was no possibility of them not winning all 4. Well, we thought, what a lot of bullshit. Here's a guy who's from a country who've never won a series over here in history, now talking about it as if there was no possibility of them not doing it.
I think that we knew some of the names, and I think we were aware that there was a kind of a burgeoning generation of Aussie players that were coming up, and we heard the names of Campese, Cutler, but only in dispatches. Other names like Farr Jones we hadn't heard at all. I think the perception was far less anxious about them, though, than anxious about the state of our own rugby in Britain, really, which was at a low ebb. So I think that the rise of Australia had started, but I mean, no one was going to lay down and die just because an Australian team landed at the airport.
And sure enough, the opposition didn't lie down in front of the Australians. The Wallabies' opening form of the tour was very patchy, including suffering a rousing forward-dominated win by Wales Super Club Cardiff, led by Gareth Davis, the exiled Wales fly half.
In my own mind, while I always felt I had 2 test sides, you are a bit apprehensive, and equally I was determined, because it hadn't happened before, that everyone would play every week. So I had to give people a go. And some of us didn't play too well at Cardiff, and we lost. So that was good for us and good for them, and that second side never looked back.
In Jones's view, the series lost to New Zealand a few months before could be attributed to the lack of a specialist goal kicker. He was determined that this would not be the case in Britain. And it wasn't a question of who, it was a question of where to play him.
It became more and more obvious that number 12 was going to be a spot that I could actually challenge for. Michael Hawker had been playing there for a number of years and playing very, very well. The bow that I had was that I could kick goals.
Michael Hawker was magnificent, and he just said to me when I told him he was out, he said, he said, I think you've picked the best team. And he shook my hand. Superb human being.
There were other selection headaches and controversies. The first string lineup would play the test matches. The midweek and provincial matches would be played by the self-styled Green Machine, captained by Michael Hawker. Many were surprised then when incumbent test players like Philip Cox, Ross Reynolds and especially Chris Roach were dropped for the first test against England.
I dropped 2 of my Manly players on form because I thought the young ones were better, Tyneman and Farr Jones. So they played their first test against England. And I dropped Chris Roach, who was the vice-captain of the side, because I wanted height in the forwards.
Chris Roach, he was a little bit more upset.
Yeah, he was, yeah. I sent him out to Wimbledon and to have a look at Wimbledon, and of course the Kipling piece is written above the centre court, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat these 2 impostors just the same. And he came back and I said, did you see that? Yes, he said. Because he was always, not sullen, but introspective. And he just looked at me and he said, and what if you can't? Well, I said, I'm not too sure. I said, you've just got to sort of get on with it.
This was the first time where we knew a lot about the opposition. In the past, you looked at yourselves, and then the day before the game you might talk about some players you knew. But Alan had people on the ground looking at who was the tight head prop, the first provincial team we were playing. We knew about that 2 weeks before we left Sydney.
Whereas England went out that day thinking, right, it's the Aussies. We always beat the Aussies, so we'll beat the Aussies again.
Question marks surely over a front 5, the same one that lined up against New Zealand in the summer, but was also beaten by Cardiff on this tour. And you can see the tension, I think, on the faces.
If you were to ask me, were England taking Australia seriously? Yes, I think they were, because it was an international game. Whether they were taking them as seriously as France or Wales or Scotland, maybe not.
When the Poms pull on that jersey, I think they play with a lot of pride, but in this particular case, there wasn't too much preparation. And once you get out there, it's too late.
work by the Australians. Campese coming through on Stringer. Mark Ella. Drop goal. And he's missed on the right. England back row certainly on top at the moment. Liner, field goal attempt. That's not a bad kick, but it goes out to the left. This is better.
Well, it was a funny game in that '84, you know, because I was loosehead against McIntyre, but then we had an injury.
Steve Mills. The England hooker is off.
Steve Brain, who then went on to win many caps, was our replacement hooker, was right up in the top of the stand, not where he could get straight on like nowadays. So the time he's come down, we had 3 scrums. And 3 scrums, I moved to hooker. So I actually played loosehead against McIntyre, and I also then played hooker against Lawton, which was not a good experience for me.
This is the replacement hooker, Steve Brain, for England.
In the end, Brain come on. Steve Brain came on, and of course he didn't know any of the calls. It was. We had to. And we were having trouble anyway with lineouts, but we had to sort of. It's going to the middle. It's going to the front. You know, back. It was this sort of shambolic approach, and it's a joke.
This to level the scores. It's Liner. Michael Hawker sitting alongside of me.
I felt that we'd won it territorially, and we'd had too many shots at field goal, you know, frigging around with trying to... And when you see that, you know, they think that they can't score. So they're desperate to get the points up. I said, hang on, just settle down. Just, you know, take your time. It'll happen. Just take your time. Stop telling the opposition that you're so desperate and your backs are so hopeless that you've got to kick the ball away. Use the damn thing.
And after half-time, 1 or 2 things went right, things we'd been working on. They clicked, Mark scored, and we got that magic thing, momentum, in the second half. And if you can bottle momentum, you're going to be the world's most successful rugby player.
Mark Ella, Liner to Ella. Mark Ella! Mark Ella! Oh, what a great try to us!
He's going to pass the ball to Roger Gill, the fullback. Michael Liner run an angle in and a gap open, and just drifted through it and underneath the post.
If you could be above a bird's eye view of England, we were so deep. You know, and all of a sudden, Ella came across playing on the gain line. And, hey, what's this gain line thing? You know, and Ella was just comfortable with the ball in his hands.
Now they have it, Australia. Ella, Liner, Gould, Matthew Burke, Gould, Liner, try!
You've just dominated possession, and when you've got the likes of Farr Jones, Ella, and you're winning a lot of ball, it's only a matter of time before you reap the benefit.
Australia, look at the overlap. Ella, oh, what magnificent hands!
If I couldn't have picked that ball up, then I probably shouldn't have been on the field in the first place. I'm supposed to be an elite athlete, so to me it was nothing special.
Ella, oh, what magnificent hands! Campese, David Campese, Underwood chasing. Poitevin, try! The referee has awarded a try.
Once they'd seen the England match, the alarm bells were ringing and could be measured on the Richter scale. Every team thought, gosh, this really is a special Australian team.
The Australian tourists then hit the toughest passage of their itinerary. Just 1 week after winning at Twickenham, they had to back up for another gruelling test at Lansdowne Road against the famously fiery Irish. In the meantime, the Green Machine ploughed through the Midlands team at Leicester. In this midweek fixture, Mark McBain, Australia's reserve hooker, was sent from the field, as was former England captain Peter Wheeler.
England had this rule that if you're sent off, you're out for the representative season. He was out, gone. So I then said, Wheeler came to me. He said, I'll swear on the lives of my children, I did nothing. What happened was that they sort of, you know, did all this, sort of fronted up like this, and the crowd loved it. Hey, like this, you see. He looks round, he sees these two hookers, get off. I mean, it was a joke, this fella, really. I'm not a person who looks for trouble, but I'm not a person who's going to be treated as if I'm a dope. And when these two players spoke to me in Ireland, I could see plainly there was an injustice, and the inclination immediately was to support officialdom, right or wrong. One bloke's career was gone for the year, Peter Wheeler. And we didn't have a forward reserve, Mark McBain, and Mark McBain was then branded, sent off on an England tour. These are, you know, are scars that no innocent player should bear. So I went into bat for them. Well, they weren't allowed any defence. And we stuck around. I hung around outside a meeting somewhere waiting for the result. And they were banned. McBain was suspended and so on. And then I get this citation delivered through Sir Nicholas Shahady. And I just said to Sir Nicholas, I'll tell them to get nicked.
The citation reprimanded Jones for criticising the disciplinary committee. Upset at losing his reserve hooker, Jones had let the committee have it as only he could. The conflict was to become a running battle for the Australian coach, something he always excelled at. As insurance, Chris Roach was reinstated for one last test. In a pinch, he could play hooker if there was a problem.
The Irish are a very hard side to play against, and we've always struggled a little bit against them. They're a spoiling side. It's hard to get good, clean ball, and it was the same story there. We bombed a couple of tries that we probably should have got.
Early in that game, I made a run, and I stepped through a couple of guys, gave the ball to Simon Poitevin.
I can still now vividly picture Hugo McNeil in front of me, and all I had to do was either run over the top of him or basically throw the dummy, and Gavin Salford would have scored a spectacular try.
And Poitevin ran up to the fullback, dummies, and gave a forward pass to Matt Burke. It was a lay-down misère try.
Campese, straight through. Look at him go! Poitevin, Matthew Burke's outside.
You know, you think back, go, well, if we scored that, floodgates might have opened.
Oh, they bombed a certain try. Poitevin could have scored himself.
It was quite critical. It nearly blew the game for us.
We were intent on taking on the Australians up front and trying to upset their supply of ball, which we managed to achieve, certainly in the first half of that game. Lineouts are different now to what they were then. There was no lifting in those days. So, I mean, the level of physical confrontation was huge. Steve Cutler was 6'7", 6'8". He had dominated lineouts for 2 seasons in the Southern Hemisphere and had done extremely well in the Test series. But I remember we had a system where we used 2 jumpers on Cutler and frustrated a lot of the Australian ploys early on in the game, which was a huge lift to us, as I say, because this was an area of the game that they were expected to dominate.
The match was extremely frustrating for the Australians, and by half-time there was no sense that either team was dominating.
Lansdowne Road is a strange place for visiting teams to play because it's an old stadium and people are very much in on top of the teams, and it does get to touring sides because they're not used to it, if you like. And the fact that we were still in that game right up into the middle of the second half just meant that I think the younger guys, the fellas who come into the side, really, they played above themselves that day.
Keenan now to give Ireland the lead. Australia go in. Here it comes. Far Jones. Slack. Overlap. Wild pass. Campese. Tyneman. Gallant stuff from the Australians. Ella. Now it's Campese. Can he get there? David Campese. No try. Another one goes begging.
With the enthusiastic young Irish team in the lead, it was the teasing brilliance of Mark Ella that made the difference.
Took the ball from the line out, did the normal thing I normally do, just ran straight. The Irish flank, or who was at the back of the line out, was a little bit slow, just took it up. Michael Weiner took a short ball, went straight through.
Andrew Slack was pulled back. Noddy threw it to Matty Burke, and Matt Burke threw it to me.
Campo's going to score. I know he's going to go. It's two, I'm unmarked, but I know he's going to try and beat the two Irish defenders.
I stepped in and then out and gave Mark an easy try.
Lucky enough for me that they nailed him, but I was on his outside, so, just took an easy pass and basically just fell over the line.
Hope he was grateful. I don't think he was.
Ella had now scored 2 tries in 2 tests and looked to be at the peak of his form.
Brilliantly won. Ella. Mark Ella takes it up. Line up. Oh, man taken out of the play. Matthew Burke. Campisi. Campisi. Mark Ella. What a try. Superb try from the Australians.
Ireland was always a bit of a worry. It was the sort of game you had to play, and a win was all that mattered, and we got it.
Every rugby team that tours the United Kingdom faces a mantra from fans of Welsh rugby. Wait till you get to Wales, they say. You might have done OK here, but wait till you get to Wales. Wales at that time still had the aura of their successes of the mid-70s, when year after year after year, they were champions of Europe and all they surveyed. If rugby is the game they play in heaven, then Cardiff Arms Park was the cathedral, the holiest of holy places to play on earth. Australia knew that this would be their toughest test, the test of their playmaking skills, the test of their defences, and the test of their newfound forward power. But Australia had already lost to Cardiff at the start of the tour, and in the week before the Wales test faced Llanelli, something that was far, far from heaven on earth.
Terry Townley got a foot to the ball, and James Black has to be like lightning. He hasn't made it safe. Is Edward Ellis going to score? Yes! Gary Pearce has!
For Cardiff and Llanelli, it's their biggest match in a 5-year period. So they were eyeballs bulging when they come onto the pitch. But the Aussies were saying, right, we've got to get through this and we've got a test match in 10 days' time, that's OK.
It's backs to the wall for Llanelli to hang on to this lead. What can the Wallabies do about it? Sent by Black back to Burke. It's going to be a try.
Just walking down to the dressing room after the game to see the boys, and some Welsh guy came up and he had his son with him, and he made some derogatory comment about Australians, and he spat on me, which, apart from being a fairly, unhealthy and not the sort of thing you'd like to do, what struck me at the time, apart from a bit of spit, was the fact that he did it with his son there, and I thought, boy, what's that kid got to grow up to?
I suppose rugby's an illness in Wales, really. Mostly mental. It manifests itself in a general hysteria, which goes beyond a love for the game. It is just a hysterical passion.
The Welsh, you never beat the Welsh. You just score more points than them, but you never beat them. And the Welsh at Cardiff Arms Park are very, very formidable. And then they picked their team. And I kept being asked this comment. So they picked 3 GBHs in the side. What do you think about that? And I'm thinking, well, I've got no idea what he's talking about, but I can't let on because they'll think that I'm sort of lacking insight that I should have. So I said, oh, it doesn't worry me. I don't ever worry about the opposition teams. They said, but 3 GBHs, do you think that should be done in a row? Oh, well, Wales have a, proud history and a proud tradition. And it kept going, and I thought, Christ, I can't really sort of answer too many more of these questions without demonstrating my utter ignorance. But I got through it. And afterwards, I turned to some bloke who I trusted there that I knew, and I said, what's this GBH? And he said, oh, it's grievous bodily harm. He said, grievous bodily harm? He said, there's 3 people in the team that have been charged with grievous bodily harm. I thought, Christ, they're bringing everything. So here they were, picked in the side. See, I thought, my God, this is what we're up for. So, yeah, there was this feeling that this is the acid test.
From the first peal of the opening whistle, the Wallabies matched the Welsh. Within minutes, they were on the board.
The Tom Lawton try was a rehearsed move that we'd done at training. I'd received the ball, and Jones used to say, just throw it over your shoulder.
and the forwards had to be there. When I was cornered, I just tossed the ball back over the shoulder, and fortunately for Tommy Lawton, Andy McIntyre couldn't catch. Went through his hands and into Tommy's hands, and he scored the try.
I wasn't very happy. I was the one that called for it, but Greggy threw it over my head back to Tommy. But anyway, that's the way it goes.
Victory here. Good ball here. Far Jones. Straight through. Gould.
I always recall Tommy being so excited. All his Christmases had come at once, but there's still an hour and a bit to go in the game. So I just recall going there and doing, I guess, the verbal equivalent of dousing him with a bucket of water and saying, you know, steady on here, well done, mate, but a bit to go. And I don't reckon he heard a thing.
The interesting thing was before the game was Alan Jones went through the opposition. He went through the Welsh team and said, Eddie Butler, number 8, hasn't played for 3 weeks, so let's utilise the blind. So Alan was very good at picking the opposition apart to see where their strengths and weaknesses were, and we did that.
We had a move that where Nick and Campo went down to the left-hand side of the scrum, and I was playing in the centre with Slacky, and we were over the other side of the scrum and, you know, watching it quite nice, and I thought, oh, you know, I might just trot up the middle here and see what happens, and of course the ball came back to Simon from David Campese to Simon Poitevin.
Automatic, bang, people going, Poitevin threw that pass, you're kidding.
My trot up the middle of the field just to see what was going on was rewarded with a try under the post at Cardiff Arms.
Far Jones, overlap. Campese. One man in front, Wyatt. Campese. Poitevin. Liner. Try. Tucked into the crook of his elbow.
He got the ball on the wrong side of his arm, people might note. He still does very well to get away.
Poitevin. And Liner, there was no stopping him from there, Pickering across in cover. But what a moment for young Michael Liner.
The Welsh had said, well, our team, we've got a fabulous pack, we are great scrummagers, and we will push Australia all over Cardiff.
Don't run away from the strength. Knock off their strength as early as you can in the test, and the rest will be easy. And that's when I said to them, the scrum is critical here, because this is where they think they've got us. And in the first scrum of theirs, just take an inch. And you'll get it, and they'll sort of shuffle a bit. Take 2. When you start taking 6 inches, you'll hear them arguing amongst one another in the back row, and we've got it. That's when the test's won. It'll happen there and then.
We buckled. And as soon as the ball went in, you could just feel it. You know, it's just one of those immense scrummages. And I suppose, you know, coming from a side that respected the scrummage to such an extent, and we dissected it so minutely, you had to say that, oh, my God, so this is what it feels like. This is what we work so hard to inflict on other people, and it's happening to us. Blimey, no wonder we do it.
In all our history, you know, we've been the fancy glam backs who can do this and that, and we haven't had the strength or the personnel up front to be really powerful and tough and macho and all those things that forwards do.
It's like a boxer, isn't it? You know, you're going through the first 5-6 rounds. It's who comes through at the vital time, perhaps in the 10th to 15th round. And to Australia's credit, 5-yard scrum, and we had the indignity of a pushover try, and like I say, it put the icing on the cake for Australia.
Can Wales hold on? Now they go for the pushover. Try! The Welsh scrum has been pushed over the goal line, and the try has gone to Steve Tyneman. The Australian forwards have done something no one was thought possible here at Cardiff Arms Park. The Welsh pack has crumbled. Australia is in the lead by 17-3. Tommy Lawton throws his fist to the crowd.
We were clinically and efficiently and cruelly taken apart up front. From set piece to set piece, we were just made to look stupid.
Not only would that have shattered the Welsh team, it shattered 60,000 Welsh supporters who couldn't actually believe what they were seeing.
The greatest thing about playing at Cardiff Arms Park, I mean, the singing is magnificent. I mean, to be on the field and to listen to the singing is really something that very few people have the pleasure of doing. But it's even more eerie and more stunning when they're silent. And that day we silenced the Welsh crowd.
Like I say, for a front row forward or any forward to have a pushover try against you is most probably the most embarrassing thing that can happen, and it happened to us.
I think that a lot of people who saw that suddenly realised that we had actually achieved a real milestone, because back in 1973, I think it was, that was continually happening to us on that same Welsh ground.
We didn't make a mistake for 28 or 30 minutes. When you consider the intricacies of rugby and how many things happen, crooked throw, a drop ball, a slightly missed tackle or whatever, 28 minutes is a long time. It might have been longer, I can't remember. It was a egg of a time. And, every opportunity that was there, we took. And it was just one of those magic moments, I suppose, like the golfer, shooting 59. It doesn't happen too often, but it just happened for us that day. We didn't actually shoot the 59 because they scored a try, which was the only try that was scored against us in the whole tour and the test matches, and that burnt us a little, but we'd played so well, we were prepared to forgive ourselves.
Bishop on the blind side. Titley. It's lost forward. It's a try. I think Bishop has scored. He appeared to lose the ball forward. He regathered. The crowd rises, but it's all too late for Wales.
With the match won for the Wallabies and almost over, who else but Mark Ella received a gift from Welsh number 8, Eddie Butler.
We'd absolutely given him a flogging. We were about in the middle of the field, and I could see it coming. There was about 3 or 4 forwards out wide. The ball had gone across, and I knew Eddie Butler was going to throw the pass inside. I just knew it, and I just said, I'll just wait, sit back.
I think I was just slightly ahead of my time, really, and no pass could have been delivered more sweetly on the turn to somebody bursting through at speed. Unfortunately, it wasn't wearing a red shirt. He did sort of say I did call for it. And I said, of course you did, Mark. So I have this vague recollection of thinking, though, somebody might have called for it.
If Eddie Butler says I called for it, he's a liar. I didn't call for the ball. I knew it was coming because he was a dumb forward.
But Mark Ella read it, and off he went.
This is Perkins. Ella! Mark Ella! What a try! And what an end to the test match! He scored a try in every test on tour! And what an ending for Australia!
They say that the turf smells at the Arms Park. It's full of sort of river taff mud and strange things well up through it. It's true, because I sort of buried my nose in it. I looked up and there was brave Robert Ackerman. He was trying to track down Mark Ella, and I just sort of... My last act was to take a deep breath of taff mud and to raise half a hand to Robert Ackerman to say, thanks, mate.
It was a game that I certainly wanted to win, and to be perfectly honest, after that game, I was very disappointed because I knew that, we didn't fire that day. We didn't function, we were well beaten, and I was, bitterly upset and bitterly disappointed.
It wasn't the fact of motivation, it wasn't the fact of attitude, it was just the fact that the Australians were the better side, and I'll accept that.
Chris Roach, who had been there in '81 and suffered defeat at the hands of the Welsh, got up and really sort of took over the happy hour and said, look, I was here 4 years ago and it's been burning me ever since, and all I want to do is leave this room and go out to the Welsh public and say, yeah, what have I been waiting for?
The brawl between Alan Jones and the home unions, which had begun in Ireland, erupted again in Wales to take some of the lustre off the Wallaby victory. On the day of the Welsh Test, Jones was again cited for his comments about Mark McBain's suspension for the Ireland Test. Again, in classic imperious fashion, he ignored them.
So then we came out of the press conference after the Welsh Test, and they were all following me. I thought, what's all this about? I've just said my bit. And they said, have you got any comment on this statement? What statement? Or they've made a statement. I said, I just repeated what I'd said in Ireland about intransigence and indifference, and that became the headline in the paper. I mean, it was just so stupid and juvenile and petty.
The Wallabies were on the verge of rugby history. The Grand Slam was as prized as it was elusive. Only 4 mighty South African teams and 1 from New Zealand had ever done it, and no Australian team yet. But it was not going to be easy. The Scotland team that stood in the Australians' path was the reigning champion of Europe, the toast of the Five Nations. Victory for them over the Australians could boost their claim to world champion standing. And the scrutiny of the tourists from home was as never before. The Wallabies knew that the game would be watched throughout Australia. Their families and friends, old fans and new converts, guys they played with and against over the years, mum's friend, Mrs. Kafups from up the road, all their old coaches. They'd all sent letters and messages to say they'd be watching, that they'd be waiting up in the wee hours across the country to see them succeed or to see them fail. For as all the Wallabies were acutely conscious, in their recent history, the Australians had let an opportunity slip past when they lost the final test against the All Blacks earlier that year. But if they were going to fail, it would not be for lack of vigour in their preparations, which were as tense as they were intense.
We had a good Barney one day, and a good public Barney in front of the team, which I'm not proud of. I sort of behaved poorly.
Nick was always a bit hot under the collar, and we were training. We got there very late, and there was certain work we had to get done. I always knew what I wanted done, and I didn't let anything else interfere with that. There's Nick sort of muttering under his breath, "Oh, this is bloody ridiculous. This is worse than that. This is ridiculous."
I think you've got to pick your words with Alan. I picked them poorly when I basically said, look, I'm not going to be a part of the extra training.
And I said, well, if you think it's ridiculous, go. Go on, go.
Jonesy wasn't going to step back. Far Jones wasn't going to step back, so we had to throw a white flag up, separate them and, get pistols at dawn.
And that night he put a little note under the door and said, sorry about all that. I mean, that, it ends when it goes. But, yeah, there was a bit of that sort of stuff.
It was one of those events, and I'm sure the boys had a lot of amusement out of it.
On the eve of the last hurdle between the Wallabies and everlasting glory, Jones made his assessment of the Scottish opposition.
Scotland have picked a scrummaging side. He said, so they've effectively conceded the line out. And that was big. He said, but they are going to take us on in the scrum. We have the best scrum in the world at the moment. He said, they're not going to beat our scrum. He said they've also picked 3 very, very, very quick back rows. And he said they're obviously going to try and beat us at the breakdown. He said, unfortunately, we have 7 back rows in our back line. So he said, it's a little bit hard for them to beat us. He said, I can't see where they're going to beat us. And to me, and I can't speak for anyone else, but to me, I'd known we'd won the test there and then.
I remember the very first time I touched the ball. Well, I didn't touch the ball, it went straight through my hands and into my stomach and onto the ground. I mean, that was nerves.
Lovely work by Campese, long pass to Ella. But Campese spoiled it all.
The Scottish game wasn't dissimilar to the England start in that we were, because the England start was the beginning of everything and we were perhaps a little tentative. The Scotland thing was the end. It was the Grand Slam if we won this. In that first 30 or 40 minutes, we were perhaps, waiting for things to happen rather than making them happen.
Up till then, my belief had always probably been that the French were the strongest scrummaging team at that time, and possibly the New Zealanders. But as that tour went on, I remember the pushover try against Wales, and they also gave England a tremendously hard time in the scrum as well. And I realised then that we would have our work cut out.
The thing that happened in that test was, though, that it was very hard in the scrums, and Tommy was under a lot of pressure because he is a great prop at nil.
And I saw the Australian scrum as a challenge individually to try and hold our own, and it was a tremendous battle in the front row. I remember several times the scrum was so low that Tom Lawton couldn't move his feet and the ball just sat there, but we didn't have the ability to push them over the ball. It was so frustrating as a front row forward.
Ella with another chance. Gould almost go. Oh yes, slack. Campese. He's over.
We practiced this move where Roger Gould took it up, threw the ball to Andrew Slack, who threw about 10-15 metre pass to me on the wing, and I ran to the line.
Now watch the pass here from Ella to Gould. He crashes through and got the pass away as he was going down. Again, something the Australians have practiced. And Campese with a little stutter step. Too much pace there for Stephen and momentum.
We had serious problems in the scrum, and because this guy, the tight head prop Ian Milne, is a really strong guy, and he made it very difficult for us. Half-time, when the referee blows the whistle, and you have a look where the teams go, Tommy Lott and myself, we started talking about the problem because we really had an urgency to fix this problem. We knew that was our responsibility, and we just kept walking and talking, and after 10 seconds, we realized that the team wasn't there, and we turned around. The team was about 30 meters in the opposite direction. So we were caught in our conversation. We were just walking away from everybody. We were in a world of our own.
At half-time, Captain Andrew Slack reminded the team of the opportunity they'd been given. The second half began much more confidently, with Roger Gould fulfilling a promise.
Very flippantly, I said, stick with me and I'll give you your 4th try.
We did a set-up play. Roger took the crash ball in midfield on the 22.
Ella. Gould.
Played the second and third phase to the left. Roger, I gave the ball to Roger.
I'd like to say it was constructively conscious about who it was going to get the try. I had Campo on my outside and I had Mark on my inside.
The Scottish fly half made a fatal mistake. He basically dropped off, thought the ball was going out wider, and basically opened up a gap. Roger sort of looked on the inside, realised there was nobody there. Instead of giving it on the outside, I give it to the inside, and I scored.
I keep on telling David it was because it was for Mark's 4th try that I gave him the pass, because he very much loves scoring tries.
Australia have it. Mark Ella. Gould. Overlap for Campese. Mark Ella. He's done it. A try in every test match. The first time in history. Mark Ella.
He was just giggling. He was stupid. Oh, I mean, he deserved it. He was a bloody brilliant footballer, Mark. I mean, his vision, and by that stage he'd developed into a complete footballer.
I wasn't very fast. I didn't have a goose step or a side step even. You know, I could probably swerve. But the way I played the game was very simple. You know, just keep it straight, make sure you catch the ball, pass it properly, run the right angles. So, you know, I wasn't a flashy player like Camper. I just couldn't believe that, you know, just an up-and-down player like me could score 4 tries. Considering I'd played 21 test matches and I think scored 2 tries in 21 test matches. Yeah, it just all happened.
Jones. Another one.
I still think that most people who are watching on TV or at the ground, probably half of our team, didn't realise what had happened.
Short line out, 3-man line out. The ball was positioned to go back. I went back with the Australian player.
Tommy Lawton and I probably only did it 15, 20 times in training. It was just a simple move and it paid off.
The ball was thrown short into the 5-metre line. Nick Farr-Jones took the ball and sprinted probably 15 metres to score that try. And I have to say it made me feel very, very silly indeed.
Here you see it head on the replay. Great little toss in there by Tommy Lawton. And Nick Farr-Jones does very well here. He steps outside the prop.
I've learned from that and I've actually used it. We have actually used it at international level and certainly at club level since.
They say about Peter Stephen, he couldn't tackle a ham sandwich. That comment came from a former Scottish international.
Late towards the second half where it was funny, we kicked the ball away. I think I actually kicked it. And they counter-attacked.
And I chased down, and I forget who was on my inside, but I thought we had it covered. And the fellow Robinson, I think, stepped inside me quite easily. It's very hard for a big ship to turn on sloppy ground. Tony Shaw, back in Queensland days, said, you know, if you stuff it up, you have to fix it up. Again, you know, reaction. So I turned and chased, and I didn't. I mean, I turned and chased him to try and catch him. He shifted the ball. I just kept running, and then all of a sudden, I think Ian Milne threw a pass to someone, and I just ran in between it, going in the wrong direction at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Peter Grigg was coming back onside, intercepted the ball.
I had hold of the ball, running towards our own try line, thinking, what the hell are we going to do with this? And the first person I saw was Mark Allen. I thought, well, surely he knows what to do with it, so I just tossed it to him.
Threw the ball to Mark Ella, who threw to me. I gave the Steve time and ran, and I stayed inside and I ran about 30, 40 metres to score.
I think that just sealed it there and then, because I think the Scotland side just thought, hell, you know, we're trying everything here. Even when we're in the attack, they take the ball off us running in the different... That sort of just, I think, broke their spirit then.
I suppose it was good to be part of a great side, but also to score 2 tries in one game, which I didn't really score that many those days, was very rewarding.
There's the Grand Slam for Australia. It's Australia's record-winning margin over Scotland too. Australia has done it. You beauty.
Andy Slack, congratulations. You've achieved every dream, I suppose, in this performance.
Yeah, we have, Nigel. You know, I was worried at half-time because it wasn't a great performance up to then, but I think the team showed their character in the second half.
The style of the rugby team must have delighted you. That second half, the tries you scored.
Thrilling. Of course, the basis comes from the forwards, and then you've got characters like this guy out here to do all the running. It was fantastic.
Well, let's bring him in, because Mark Eller, try a test, and a dream series makes up for everything you might have missed.
Yeah, well, that's right. Made up a little bit from 1981-82, where we, only won 1 out of 4, and this time around, the Grand Slam is something that we never thought we could do, but we're really happy we've done it.
We're not going to lose you to rugby either. I know you're dying to get off to the celebrations, but you're staying in rugby, Mark?
I really won't know, Nigel, until I get home in March. I'll make up my mind then.
Satisfaction's a hard thing to quantify or describe, and we were just, we were pleased with what we've done, and we went back to the hotel, and I think by that time, we thought more about it, so a couple of hours later we're all together, and we said a few things that night. It was quite emotional, and that was extremely gratifying, and everybody said their bit, and it was a lovely time.
When Slacky started to speak as captain, and Alan Jones didn't want him to speak for some reason, but he started to speak, and he started to sort of get a bit emotional, and our tough man Enrique Rodriguez started the waterworks.
What did they tell you? That was the first one to cry?
Everyone went with him. So it was... If someone had walked into the room, they would have thought, what's going on here? There was just... it was just amazing.
This was like everything, the world has gone upside down. The guys that never said a word, all of a sudden they're talking out of their ears. The guys that were always commanding the room, they were all mute, and I think I was one of the first to start crying without knowing why. But I guess that the realization that we finished the job that we set to achieve, and then was like almost like, thank God we did it. Not an empty feeling. It's actually a satisfaction, a great satisfaction, because you achieve what you want to achieve.
As problems go for a coach, it wasn't a bad one, but it was still a problem. The Wallabies, victorious in all 4 tests, were celebrating hard as never before. But there was still Pontypool to face and the traditional end-of-tour match against the Barbarians.
The whole of Europe were ranging against us in 4 days' time. So it was a very difficult week for us, because equally you can't be sort of saying to people, get in bed by 11 o'clock, and I mean, they'd won the ground. They were in the history books, these blokes, and they were out in the town, And there was a balance. I knew they were responsible, but I mean, what's Pontypool against a couple of beers and, a good night? So we got through that. God knows to this day whether we scored or not.
Guys were pretty sick because we'd not many teams had won the Grand Slam before, so that week wasn't a good week to sort of get out there and train. And I think Alan said about one of his players, if you actually breathe on somebody, you could knock them dead or be put in jail.
I'd celebrated after the Scottish test, and it was probably in no fit state to play, and in fact pleaded with Jones before the game to pick, I think, Tim Lane to play 5'8" because I couldn't run. I wasn't in any shape to play, but I'm glad now he said you got to get out there and play.
It was a very good Barbarian side, and it was a recognition, I think,
of how strong Australia were, that the Barbarians, the people who selected the Barbarians, tried to match the strengths of the Australian side. Because I think Serge Blanco was brought in and Jerome Gallion, who was the French scrum half at the time.
The match was treated as a really serious test match. It was almost as though the credibility of the Northern Hemisphere was on the line after what had happened over the previous few weeks.
Still, we had fun at training sessions, and Jonesy, the last training session, said, "Okay, everyone sort of think up a innovative tap kick we have rather than sort of kick for goal, kick for touch. We'll just have innovative tap kicks out there."
Well, now let's just keep an eye open here, because the Wallabies have promised that there may be some fun and games going on, and here's a start. Is this the cavalry charge? It's legal. The flying wedge isn't, and isn't that marvellous? Ella Hawker.
I think we realised pretty quickly after that, you know, these guys meant to win, and it was our reputations at stake. And you know, the last thing we wanted to do was win the Grand Slam and then lose to the Barbarians. So we sort of had a quick chat to each other. I think Slacky got us together and said, you know, we might just concentrate a little bit harder and see how we go.
The veterans of the midweek team, the Green Machine, were rewarded in the match against the Barbars. Players like Michael Hawker, Chris Roach and Stan Pilecki all got a run as the Wallabies bowed out of the tour.
Through now, he goes back inside to Slack. Slack's looking for support. Up come the forwards.
I know what I was doing there, but I do remember the incident. And I think so does Slacky, because he passed me the ball. The very next thing he did was get in behind me to support, because he's saying, what the hell have I done here, giving it to the pole? So I threw the old Hail Mary pass, and Slacky picked it up, and we were fortunate enough to score a try. A good try, actually, length of the field, because a few blokes handled it. But I knew if I threw the ball over my head, there'd be someone there, because I was there. The other 14 had to be within 2 inches of me, because I'm normally the slowest bloke there, so.
The Barbarians has always been one of my favourite teams. Probably maybe not built to play the running, flowing rugby, but I just used to love playing with all the different players from all the different countries.
Pick up by Anderson. Gallion. The drive on there, and the try is scored. It's Ian Milne.
In fact, I scored a try, which a very rare occurrence, and nearly got another couple. It was a great game to play down in Cardiff Arms.
Well, no problem there. That was quite a good channel across. Ella, Slack, Ella. Ella, Slack, Ella, liner clean through. Oh, beautiful. Now, Hawker is outside, but he's given it inside, and Poidevin goes, and Poidevin has scored.
We got some wonderful tries that day. Rory Underwood, I remember, scored one particular try in the corner.
And Gallion. Davis once more. Mullen. Ackerman. Underwood flying for the corner. Gould set him up, but he's missed him. Underwood in.
After the Welsh Test, on the steps of the Angel Hotel in Cardiff, it was a stung Robert Ackerman who had accosted a group of Wallabies.
We went into the hotel, and it was Alan Jones, Michael Liner and myself, and Rob Ackerman said, "Oh, congratulations." He said, "I don't think your backs were too good today." He just kicked their backsides. And Alan was a bit upset with this.
Didn't think your backs were any good. Thanks, Robert, I said.
And who should appear as the final defender between David Campese and the Barbars try line?
But now the Australian counter-attack through Ella. And it's Campese. Campese is over halfway. He's only got Ackerman to get past him. If he goes for the line, he feeds on, and it's a superb try for Michael Hawker.
My line of thinking is all I was trying to do at that time was to stall him. You know, at the end of the day, if he'd wanted to, Campbell could have just he would have burnt me off on the outside. But I was just looking for a bit of cover, and as it happened, I did stall him, and he didn't score that one. I was the player he made a fool of, if anyone needs to remember.
I suppose if you want to be a showman, you be a showman. And at the time, that's the only thing I could really think of, and it worked, so.
The 8th Wallabies had done it. They'd achieved their objective by winning all 4 tests and defeating the Barbarians in a classic display of running rugby. Andrew Slack, the Victoria's captain, retired, but returned in 1986 when the first World Cup was in the offing. Mark Ella, at the grand old age of 25, retired forever from international football. Why did he do it?
Well, the media afterwards suggested that Mark left the game because of me, which is just a nonsense argument, but I mean, there were plenty of those stories.
I would be giving more consideration to staying on in the game I love if anyone but Alan Jones were national coach. Our philosophies on the game are so vastly different, however, that I can't enjoy playing under his commands. For him, it has to be win-at-all-costs stuff. He's a fanatic for detail, and I can't be tied down to detail.
That was my debut into journalism. What a way to go. In retrospect, I probably should have been a little bit more moderate and probably should have written it differently, but at that time I guess the article was ghosted and I, not that the ghostwriter did anything or wrote anything that I didn't agree with.
Because he did write an article, I think.
Well, someone else wrote it for him, yeah.
But it did carry his name, so...
Yeah, absolutely.
Did that disappoint you at all?
Very much so.
Did you ever speak to Mark about it?
About it, no.
Do you think if Bob Dwyer was still coach, you would have played on?
It's a good question. Possibly, I may have, but certainly with Jonesy coaching, whilst we had enormous success, I wasn't going to play again. But that's not the reason I retired. I mean, I'd made up my mind prior, and whether Bob would have influenced me to stay or not, it's probably hypothetical now anyway.
How did you take retirement? Did you miss the game at all? Did you miss playing football?
You joking? I was made for retirement. I'm the world's greatest spectator. Give me a beer and a pie, mate, I'm happy as the person next to me. No, I wouldn't have retired if I thought I was going to miss the game. And I didn't miss the game. I still don't miss the game. I was happy with the decision I've made. I've moved on. I got into journalism, did other things, went skiing. You know, all the things you couldn't do when you're playing. No, I'm really good. I was really good when I retired.
There were, of course, still new heights for the Wallabies to scale. Australia hadn't won the Bledisloe in New Zealand for decades, and the inaugural World Cup of 1987 was just peeking over the horizon. But in the then and there, the Grand Slam stood as a great victory in its own right, and there was also a growing sense that it would be a key stepping stone in the Wallabies' long campaign to be acknowledged as the world's best team. Most importantly, it broke a kind of hoodoo for Australian teams travelling to Europe, something that would be important for the 1991 World Champion Wallabies. And the effect of the Grand Slam victory on Australia's place in the rugby world can be felt even now.
Well, it was certainly the last time anybody ever took Australia lightly. You know, ever since '84 happened, nobody has ever dared say, we'll beat Australia as long as we play well.
They were a side that is remembered very fondly here, both particularly for the quality of their rugby. I mean, if you talk to people who know their rugby in the four home countries and you mention Australia, then they will always refer to that '84 Australian side.
I think in terms of defining moments for Australian rugby, that pushover scrum at Cardiff Arms in 1984 will be a contender to be number one, because it did say that we weren't a limited team. You know, we've always had the backs and we needed this strength up front, and never had we showed it for any long period of time. We'd been doing it on that tour, and the way you really nail that was to push over a Welsh 8 at Cardiff Arms, and they did that. And I think people then realised Australian rugby was here for keeps.
But I would have thought the primary legacy was to say to the world and to Australian players and Australian supporters, we can be as good as anybody, and we're not just entitled to win, we don't have to apologise for winning, and if we go about it sensibly, we can win regularly. And that's what's changed, I hope, the face of Australian rugby. We're now a feared force in the game, wherever the game is played in the world, and I hope that we played some small role in that.